So baby,
This is WGRG 100.5 FM, where we meet the absolute minimum FCC broadcasting standards. It's time to hang on and brace yourself for a community radio program that's frankly indescribable. Let's talk Geneseo. Two guys with nothing better to do on a Friday morning but to talk about our community. Geneseo City Administrator Brandon Meglin and City Alderman Keith Kennett. And yeah, nobody, and I mean nobody, puts the blah in blah, blah, blah like these guys do.
And good morning. You are listening to WGRG 100.5 FM in Geneseo. Let's talk Geneseo on this Friday morning that is back to wintertime here.
Yeah.
Morning, Brandon. I'm Keith Kennett, special guest with us that Brandon will introduce in a bit. But back to winter.
I was outside after work in shorts the past couple of days, walking outside, and here
we
we are.
Well, there you go.
Downpour last night, and then we're freezing up this morning.
You know, that was it was a slightly biblical moment there with the downpour and for some reason I decided that I had to come out and come here and double check a few things, and
Oh, did you get nervous?
Well, I remembered a few things with the changes.
For the show.
I just wanted to make sure everything worked before we had our guest with us this morning. But I walked about maybe 20 feet outside, and got really wet.
Yeah.
Should have waited 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, looks like about another week of winter maybe, and then we may be out of the woods on it.
Yeah, I think so. Those of you viewing on the stream or watching live on TV 50, you may notice that we have a little bit of a new look here in the studio. The big microphones are gone, and we have an NFL game announcer look with headset and headset mics, but hopefully you will recognize a noticeable improvement in audio quality to where you can hear us more and all the background noise we have in this room a lot less.
I feel like I can tell just on the feedback in our ears right now.
It sounds better.
Yeah.
So hopefully you as a listener and viewer appreciate that improvement, and I'm just happy that they're working as I thought they would work. So.
I mean, it is a problem for me during the show every week. I drink my morning coffee, and now we have a mic blocking.
We'll be able to
drink
hear
bowl, so.
Brandon slurping down his coffee in the morning, but that's okay. I'll try and kill your mic if possible. You know, we could get a little switch that you could just push if you wanted to mute your mic, but
you're getting really advanced.
That's another budget year. So
yeah.
All right. Well, with that, Brandon, I know we'll get right to our guests, and we'll let you proceed with the introduction.
Yes. Very special guest this morning, State Senator Lee Ariano Jr. joins us. Lee represents us here in Geneseo. He's a United States Army veteran, former small business owner, and former mayor of Dixon, Illinois. Welcome, Lee.
Good to be here. Good to be here. I'm excited. We've tried to make this work for a little while, and we got it on one of the busiest weeks of the year, the governor's State of the State and Budget Address, and somehow this is when we got it in. So, hey, that works.
There you go.
Yeah. A lot of people in Geneseo probably know that in our municipal building here, Lee has, what do you call it, a district office?
Yeah. One of my remote offices to do remote meetings. I have my main office is in Dixon, but because they gerrymander and cut up these maps, you have these weird prongs. You want to make sure you get time there. So Peoria and Geneseo, I have my satellite offices. So.
We've been talking with Don Tubbs for quite a while about getting Lee in here, and made it work in February.
Yeah, Don helps me organize and be responsive to this west side of my district. She's been great, and she helps run that office. But yes, we got it in. I'm glad to be here. A lot happening.
Yeah, and it's actually a really good week because we had the State of the State address here, and a lot going on. I know, Lee has really dedicated a lot of time to Henry County, and I mean, I've seen you at multiple things here and had a chance to speak with you, and we really appreciate that. Here in Geneseo. I guess we can get right into some of the things that are going on.
Sure.
Recently at Hammond Henry Hospital, I've talked with the CEO Wyatt a few times about some of their challenges going on, but you held or participated in a roundtable.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what that is and kind of some of the changes going on with rural health care?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to keep it high level because you can get really into the weeds, especially when you start discussing the interface between federal monies, state monies, and then, of course, the local impacts. But the very high level is the state of Illinois, which has been broke for a long time. I think people know that. One of the ways they balance their budget or get close to it, I wouldn't call it a truly balanced budget, is they just don't match inflation adjustments for things like reimbursements. It's a huge problem all across the field. That's long-term care, like nursing homes face problems with that, rural health care, and hospitals face problem with that. In-home care providers, you could go right down the list. And we see that especially impactful in rural health care because the next closest facilities are sometimes quite a drive. And so the negative impact, there's less synergies than in the suburbs or in the city. And that's in anything. Firefighting, the next firefighting aid call is a town that's 10, 15 minutes away, right? It literally merges together. So the logistics of everything is different in the rural areas. And in the state of Illinois, unfortunately, the combination of power being centralized in Chicago and the state being broke means the rural areas are trying to fight to get understood. Let me put it that way. And simultaneously at the federal level, they're making some moves to try to balance their budget, which is probably an almost impossible task in my opinion, but it needs to be attempted. And so they have put limits on several states that have abused reimbursements. And to keep this real short, basically what happens is the state of Illinois and many other states will tax healthcare providers. They will pass a tax on them. And then they will get that tax matched by the federal government. So if you raise $500 million in provider taxes, you get $500 million matched from the federal government. And then we give all of that back to the healthcare providers. It's a bit of a scheme, right? And the feds got a little frustrated with this being abused. There are some states that don't do it at all, like Alaska, which is incredible to me when I look at Illinois' budget. And then there's some on the other end of the scale, like Illinois, that abuse it. And the Fed said, all right, we're freezing everybody in place. We have new formulas on how this is going to work. And those of you who have been abusing it, we're not going to cut it, but you're locked in place. And that is a double whammy for here in Illinois because we were using that so much. And that federal money was being put into our budget for health care, rural health care, all health care. And to make it even worse, there were some Chicago area hospitals, and I won't get into details, but they weren't really paying the provider tax. And because there's a lot of political influence up there, there wasn't really any serious repercussions. And it got to the point where one state senator, and I won't say his name because he was being mostly tongue-in-cheek, but he was like, I need to go back to my district and tell all my hospitals to stop paying this tax because apparently you don't need to pay it and you'll still get all your money. So you have all of these huge dynamics, the feds trying to get their budget under control, the state being broke and in triage mode, and it's all come crashing down on providers over the years. And, some of the reimbursement rates if you inflation adjusted, are still at like 2017. 18 levels, 2019, which is before this massive inflationary period of COVID. So that has had a direct impact into nursing home facilities closing around rural Illinois, hospitals under pressure, and it's all kind of happening at once. So that we were discussing all of those, and there's other topics in there that challenge hiring trained staff and how we can utilize community colleges to bring those in. All of those topics, good topics. And the reason I like to get out to each of my hospitals is they also have their own unique challenges. So I talked about some of the high-level ones, but each one of them has, potentially a different setup structure. Obviously, Geneseo's is different than something that's part of a bigger OSF network, which I just saw in Dixon. My wife works at what was KSB Hospital, independent hospital in Dixon for over a century, and now they are part of OSF. So those are the changes happening.
All right, I want to shift a little bit on some of these local impacts to transit.
Yeah.
We talked pre-show, and we've talked before in Geneseo. City purchased a large parcel of land for this magical passenger rail project that started under the Obama administration.
Yeah.
And I think I was in college then, Keith.
It's coming down the tracks.
we're getting to a point where some of our elected officials locally here want to talk about maybe doing something with that land, or at least putting something on the table to talk about it, because the project just isn't moving forward. I want to get your overall opinion on the transit bills, and you've talked about money moving to Chicago, to the rural areas,
Right.
and how maybe that ties into this project for us little guys here in Geneseo, when we talk about a train potentially going from the Chicago area
Right.
in a straight line to Moline, which is the most logical route. But we get mixed signals on what's going on
Yes.
with transit, right?
Yes, and it's a much harder question for me to answer than it should be, because they leave state senators out of the loop quite often on these discussions. And the transit bill is a good example. That the bigger bill, quite frankly, was atrocious for rural Illinois, for suburban Illinois. The bigger bill, they had been trying to solve the Chicago public transit problem. Very expensive. They're running it very inefficiently. And so they were going to do a statewide sales tax on services. And this turned out to be really unpopular, because apparently people in Chicago also get their car repaired and their haircuts and all of the other things that we spend services on. So that turned out to be unpopular. Everybody was scared to vote for it for good reason. And so they switched to an idea for this online delivery tax. And you guys remember that. They were calling it the pizza delivery tax or the Amazon tax. It was going to be $1.50 for any online delivery. And as a guy who used to own Jimmy John's restaurants, that would have included app deliveries or online deliveries for your food, just all these things. And it turns out people in Chicago also order Jimmy John's and from Amazon. And so that became very unpopular. And so we go through all of last year, and we don't get any of this passed because it's unpopular, and the governor's kind of a little MIA because he's out traveling the country doing his thing. And we get to the end of veto session, and suddenly in the last minute, they changed all the language. They didn't put a tax into it because they just passed a bunch of taxes in the spring. And instead, they changed the funding formulas for roads and bridges in Illinois. And so what they did is they swept over $500 million a year from the rural road and bridge funds annually in to pay for Chicago transit, which apparently is legal under the lockbox amendment of the state constitution because it's still transportation. So since it's still transportation, technically, this was legal. And then they gave $140 million of that 500 plus back to the rural public transit. So that's, Whiteside Transit, Reagan Transit, Peoria, the various public transit we have here. And our net loss was somewhere around $400 million. So the bill itself was terrible for infrastructure. A number of rural unions split off from their statewide unions because essentially they were kind of betrayed by their Chicago brothers and are losing funding. And in this bill, there were what I would call various sweeteners to try to get folks to vote for it. And one of them was this long planned project to get appropriated. Now, I want to make it clear to everyone, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. That means now the money is appropriated. We've had projects appropriated in the Dixon area for over a decade, and the funds never actually finalized, shall we say, through the various stages of the appropriation process into the actual project phase. So the good news is, the silver lining for this bill that is otherwise terrible for Henry County and our region is that that project was in there. Language for that project was in there at the state level, and it was budgeted. Again, budgeted doesn't mean spent, but it was put in the budget. Yeah. So the question now becomes, is that ever going to turn into a real project? They're going to go into a deeper kind of investigatory phase where they're going to do more studies and figure more things out. And in theory, that is the next steps for this project, right? I, however, and I don't mean to be cynical, I am very skeptical that this is a live project anytime soon, and I also question whether it ever becomes a live project. And then we have one more complicating wrinkle, which is, even if it does, are they actually going to include Geneseo? Because I have asked that question a number of times. I know the city has asked that question a number of times. I have gotten no answer. And quite honestly, I think my peers on the other side of the aisle who are near here, like Senator Halpin, I don't think they've completely know, because if we're still in an investigatory phase and we're still doing some of this research, that can change, right? So they couldn't make promises to me because they don't know. So all of that to say, it was a very, very ugly bill, and the one part that was a silver lining, I'm not sure we can count on. And that is a long way of answering, I don't know what you should do with that land.
I mean, that's probably the straightest answer we've heard on this situation.
Right. Yeah. So it's possible, and I couldn't even give you a percentage chance. I could tell you if they're going to move forward, with this terrible bill with all the negatives, I am going to try to fight for the one positive that's in there. Yeah. But we'll see what we can do. As a follow-up to that story, we were all wondering what they were going to do for that $500+ million going forward. And this year, it's budgeted as bonding. So the state is just going to borrow more money to keep the rural road funds and go deeper in debt. That was the governor's proposed solution on Wednesday. Now the legislative process takes over, and we'll see.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And it has been, and we've talked about the Amtrak thing, and previously as the one person that was kind of here when this started, 50 years ago, or whenever we had this conversation. But it really is eye-opening. This is just one project, and it's a fairly big project. But in the scheme of things, of everything happening in our state, and this one project is, to be blunt, you've just kind of been this challenging maze of just goo, and the money though that had there has been funds expended though on studies after studies and engineering and environmental and then it's 5 years later those studies are no longer valid, so we got to redo the studies again.
That's exactly right.
And it is just amazing, but it's just this project. And imagine multiplying that by thousands and thousands of other things going on.
Yes, and that's where I, as a conservative, struggle with some of these projects. When the state's so deeply in debt, well, I like this one. I think we need to look at it. If we went back to the basics and just got our core infrastructure built up and cut all the wasted engineering costs and all the wasted planning costs and just made plans and executed them within a 5-year span, our state would be so farther ahead. And throwing back to what I said about Chicago Transit, that's one of the reasons they're so much more expensive than a normal big city, because they do this same thing. They plan a line expansion, then they don't do it, and then they wait for money, and then the money's cut, and then it's no good anymore, and they have to replan it, and they rack up all of these personnel and engineering costs that accomplish nothing when you could have just maintained your rail in Chicago.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That's enough on transit.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Now that I've thoroughly depressed everyone.
Let's shift to, I want to make sure we get the question in on, as a former small business owner yourself. Geneseo has always been proud of our small business environment.
Phenomenal business community.
State Street's been a thriving Main Street. In Illinois, I mean, we're seeing some challenges now, like a lot of communities are. I think the changing face of retail sales, buying things online, things like that. So I guess the question for you is, from a Springfield standpoint and business regulation, what are some things that you're fighting for that can help small business owners in Geneseo continue to thrive, or somebody that wants to start a new business?
That's a great question, and I'll give 3 quick answers. Number one is we have to have a long-term plan to get property taxes under control. If we want good brick-and-mortar stores in our downtowns instead of people buying online, we need to lower the overhead of our local stores. And so I think we were talking before the show, the state, in the current budget, the governor proposed cutting more funds to local governments. That is either going to generally show up as property taxes or sales taxes. So we're going the wrong way. I would love to see the state shift to a plan where we're more business friendly, and that in turn generates tax revenue and more businesses. And Illinois' economy has trailed national economy basically at least all of the last 10 years from what I've seen. So that's step one. Step two is we do need to lower some of the bureaucracy. We've gotten very red tape heavy. I saw that firsthand as a small business owner. And there are a lot of steps where they need to go out and hire a bookkeeper to do basic stuff, or legal advice for basic stuff that other states don't have to do. And then the last thing I would say is at the local level, support economic development. In the olden days, and I'm going way back to like Jim Edgar and before, so we're talking 20 years ago, the state had actual Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, which is the current agency name, support for regional economic development groups in cities. And what you've seen is the state's gotten broke and cut investment in that. Cities have had to take the lead in their own economic development. Regional nonprofits have had to take the lead in that. And that is something that the state needs to do a better job of being involved in. Because there's times when we're trying to do regional development, say along I-80, and having a state economic support right there, getting knowledge, being a connection to the state, getting answers fast, is important. I've seen projects fail just because we can't get answers fast enough, and they move on to the next thing. So those would be my top three that I'd say. The biggest one, of course, is just the local support, which is why you guys do so much. The business community is thriving and protecting itself. That's number one. But it'd be real nice if the state jumped on board too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Well, we've got about 9 minutes or so here. I think the movie's on Amazon Prime still, I think. All the Queen's Horses.
Yeah.
Right? I was flipping through Amazon the other day.
Yep,
and I think it's
on
still
there. So I think.
You were the mayor after.
Dixon. Yeah, of Dixon. Right after that.
Crunwell stand.
So I owned one of my Jimmy John's was the one right there in Dixon. And I had not been deeply involved in local politics at that time. Like a lot of young men, you're paying attention to the federal drama and all this other stuff, and you don't realize my school boards and my cities, they tax a lot and spend a lot too, and you need to keep an eye on them. And it turns out Dixon had the biggest municipal fraud in U.S. history, roughly $54 million stolen over 20 years. So speaking of property taxes, when you wake up one morning, you're like, this is why my taxes are so high. This city employee who was specifically entrusted with our monies was feeding it to her horses.
Yeah.
And started this big horse racing operation. And so I got involved and ran for mayor, and the danger of running for office, as you might know, is that you might win, and you have to do the work. So I spent 8 years doing ethical reforms, financial reforms, pension reforms, and then finally got the city healthy enough to where I could do the things a mayor would normally do, which is economic development and road planning and infrastructure. And I do think that actually has a strong correlation to my current job, because the state of Illinois is suffering from both of those things. We have massive pension debt at the state level from bad decisions over the course of 60 years. There's plenty of critiques I have of our current governor, but he didn't create that particular mess. That's been around for a long time. I'd probably place the biggest blame on Blagojevich, and that's 3 governors ago. And we also have a big infrastructure problem and property tax structure problem in Illinois, partially because of that first problem, that legacy debt. And we also have corruption problems in Illinois. We just sent our former Speaker of the House to jail, longest Speaker of the House in Illinois history. And the year before that, right before I got sworn in, we spent the longest-serving Chicago alderman to jail, Alderman Burke. And, of course, Blagojevich himself, who I just mentioned, he spent some time in jail. The Republican governor before him spent some time in jail. So we have this very long, storied history of...
We have a legacy of corruption.
We do. And the corruption tax is real. Being corrupt costs people money. Dixon showed that, and we see that in Illinois. So, and that leads into the whole Bears conversation that we were having earlier, right? Everybody's talking, are the Bears going to Indiana? Is it going to be the Hammond Bears? The Michigan City Bears? What's going to happen? And part of that is because their property tax bill, under what they were trying to build, would have been by far the highest in the all NFL. In fact, it would have been probably 5 to 10 times higher than any other property tax bill in the NFL. And so people are like, oh, they'll never move to Indiana. And I think there are some people who really thought that, like, oh, no, businesses leave Illinois for some of these problems. Sometimes we keep, sometimes we don't. And that includes NFL franchises. You got to believe, like, $100 million a year in extra property tax revenue or more is something they're going to do the math on and say, is this a good business model? I'm hopeful we're going to keep them, but Indiana's in the fight. It's serious.
So yes or no? Are they moving?
I'm going to go with no. I think we're going to be able to keep them, but I will say the governor and the majority got serious about this a little later than they should have. It never should have really been a risk. And and now it is. So I'm gonna go with no, they're not leaving, and I'm gonna watch them no matter what. But I'm getting nervous.
Yeah, that's what I shared with the senator before we went on the air. That there's a lot of news outlets reporting that it was pretty much a done deal yesterday. People, different subjective perspectives, and different outlets. But boy, you start looking through it, and it's like, did it happen?
No, they canceled a hearing in Springfield because my understanding, and that was on the House side, not the Senate side, so I don't have as good information there, but my understanding is the Bears wanted a few more tweaks, and so they canceled that particular hearing so both sides and the governor's office could finish that. And simultaneously, Indiana moved on the next step of their process. And so I think a lot of people took, Indiana moved forward on their step, and Illinois canceled the meeting. This is over. That's not accurate, I don't believe.
Yeah.
But close enough to truth that like I said, I'm nervous.
Well, and one thing, and it does tie in, though, with this, but that, and as an elected official in the state, but yeah, we're surrounded by other states. And, and as you look around Illinois, southeast side of Chicago, kind of just not booming. Danville, the Illinois side of St. Louis.
Right here in the Quad Cities.
And we've done a pretty good job here with our Iowa neighbors, with Rock Island and Moline, I think, still staying fairly strong. But there is the reality of not only is it people choosing to live in the neighboring states, but also businesses as well. And it's just the reality of things anymore, to where there isn't, nobody's caring that much about where a border is. If the football stadium's a half an hour this direction or a half hour in that direction, most people don't care.
No. And 10 years from now,
right.
My kids, if they're watching the Bears, aren't even going to really know or remember that.
Right.
I went to games at Soldier Field. That's a huge challenge. And unfortunately, Illinois is getting less competitive each year. Even silly things like the tax on tips, where state law, we're decoupled from federal there so that we could still tax people's tips. So their federal taxes aren't going to happen on tips, but the state's going to get theirs. And all the way up to big things like the tax deductions for big companies investing in Illinois, like Caterpillar or John Deere or whoever. We decoupled from the state tax code when they just passed those tax cuts, and other states are looking more and more competitive. So that's another. Back to your point about economic development. When you're in a hole, stop digging. That's first step. And then we need to start getting out of it. Instead, we're saying, no, we're going to raise taxes more. And Indiana and Wisconsin and Iowa keep looking better. And it's making it harder for those of us in elected office to fight for our regions. Frustrating.
Maybe we should throw our name in the hat, Keith, the Geneseo Bears. What do you think?
Yeah.
Got enough land?
We could maybe partner up with.
Right on I-80. I think that's a good development. Draw from Iowa and Southern
we can
Wisconsin.
maybe interact with Davenport. We get Iowa on board.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
there might be
help us force annex some of the farm ground around the city. That would be appreciated.
Well, and then we would definitely have a good argument to get that Metro Rail done. Like, shoot out here from Chicago, come to the Bears game.
It's a win-win-win.
Right.
That's what we do here. We solve problems.
Right. I think that's a great plan. Sign me up. I'm on board.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think a good one to wrap things up on, Lee, is you're still in the Army Reserves, correct? You're a leader in the reserves.
I was in Davenport last weekend serving my time in the Quad Cities there. Yeah.
Well, salute your service.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think a good question to wrap it up on is, how your experience in the military and disciplines that you've learned throughout your career, how does that translate to the sometimes chaotic environment that you have to deal with in Springfield, and how do you kind of tie it all together?
That's an excellent question, and I'll tell you, my military service, first breaking me in the beginning, that's what basic's for, and some of those experiences, right? You're like, it break you down to build you up. Very much is a preparation for the chaotic, shifting landscapes of politics, right? And we were just talking about how fast transit changed and how fast this Bears discussions change and all these things. And you learn quickly to adapt to the realities on the ground. You can have your thoughts and your opinions and your ideologies, and then once you get into it, you have to adapt to the situation on the ground, right? So in the military, we can go in with the best laid plan, and 5 minutes after hitting ground, realize this isn't going to work and we need to adjust fire. So that's number one. Number two is just building up my own sense of self-discipline and motivation. And that helped me as an entrepreneur too. As an entrepreneur, you don't have a boss. You got to motivate yourself. You got to drive yourself. And you got to learn to correct yourself and build a team around you that can correct you, because there's nobody to smack you on the hand and say, don't do that. And when you're wrong, you burn your own money as an entrepreneur. You're not burning corporate's money. It's yours. And that also helped prepare me, I think, for my current services. As a senator, I have 220,000 bosses, but none of them are with me every day, right? So you have to be self-motivated, self-driven, and do the work. And quite frankly, I see a lot of legislators from either parties that either they get lazy because they've been there a long time, or we're gerrymandered in safe seats so they don't get out as much as they should. They lose touch with reality. And that also hurts what we're trying to do at the bigger scale. We need all 59 of us senators to be engaged, putting in input, going out to our region and knowing it so we can advocate it. Going back to your question about the hospital, that's why you got to get out to your hospitals. You can't just read about what's happening. You need to go talk to the people doing it and living it, because that perspective is important. And the military helped me with that. You can lead from the back, but if you never visit the front lines and talk to your troops and talk to sergeants like me that are running stuff, then you're going to make some bad decisions once in a while. And I try to avoid that as a senator. Learned the lessons from my time in the military.
Yeah. Great. Well, Senator Ariano, thank you for being here today.
Thanks.
This was a great discussion.
Thanks for doing it. Great to be here at Genesee High School. This is a cool room. This is exciting. I'll be glad to be back sometime.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back.
Absolutely.
And appreciate you taking the time to spend time here in Geneseo, meet with local leaders, business owners, and take our community seriously. It means a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Keith, anything else?
I think we're good. Nothing too exciting from the last council meeting. We already talked about that. We have a committee of the whole meeting, I think, Tuesday
coming
night.
up. Committee of the whole, special city council coming up Tuesday. Got some big things moving forward with the J.F. Edwards construction project. That's a big one. We have a lot of steps in the future on with annexation of land on the east side of town and a potential new TIF district to spur some utility extensions to them as they expand jobs and new buildings, which will hopefully be land here in Geneseo if everything goes as planned in the process. So,
well, there you go.
Stay tuned for more there.
Well, and we'll get the information out there through this program, or you can check the city's website and social media things and all that to stay informed. All right. Well, we'll pull the plug then, Brandon.
All right.
Again, Lee, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Senator.
Glad to be here.
Brandon, always good seeing you, and we appreciate everybody tuning in and listening this morning. And this has been Let's Talk Geneseo, and you're listening to WGRG 100.5 FM in Geneseo. Have a great weekend.